They were called the Silent Twins. But honestly, that label doesn't even begin to scratch the surface of their story. It's a story about a bond so intense it created its own secret world, and so dangerous it would end in a mystery that, to this day, is still unsolved. And that brings us to this, just a really shocking quote from June Gibbons. She said this only days after her identical twin sister Jennifer died. It's a chilling statement, and it really sits at the very heart of this entire tragic story. So, here's the core mystery. After spending over a decade locked away in one of Britain's most notorious high-security hospitals, on the very day they were supposed to be released, one of them dies. And nobody really knows why. That's the question, isn't it? It's the question that drove their lives and defines their legacy. To even begin to understand the answer, we have to go all the way back to the beginning, to this private world they built together, just for themselves. You see, the twins' retreat from the world, it wasn't a choice they made in a vacuum. It was a defense. It was like they were building an architecture of silence, brick by painful brick, in response to a really hostile environment. So their father was in the RAF, which meant their life was one of constant movement. When they finally did settle down in Wales in the mid-70s, they found themselves completely and totally isolated. As the only black family in town, they were subjected to this relentless, cruel bullying. So what did? They started to turn inward, deciding that the only people they could truly rely on were each other. Okay, so this is where so much of their story gets misunderstood. Their silence, it wasn't a sign of low intelligence. It was a textbook anxiety-driven defense called Selective Mutism. And what people called their secret language, well, that was actually just a super fast-paced version of Bajan Creole, their parents' dialect. Even their synchronized movements, that was them presenting a united front to the world, a fortress of two. But here's the incredible part. Inside that silent fortress, a vibrant and creative world was absolutely exploding. While they were silent to everyone on the outside, their minds were anything but. Their bedroom became their entire universe, their studio, their university, everything. After they got diaries for Christmas one year, they just started writing voraciously. They taught themselves through a mail order course and just poured all of their feelings, their alienation, their frustrations, their desires, into their fiction. And just look at what they produced. They wrote novels with these incredibly complex and dark themes. We're talking addiction, trauma, revenge, identity. This wasn't just some hobby. They were serious writers. Today, they're considered pretty significant outsider artists. June's novel gives you this fascinating peek into her mind. She sets it in glamorous Malibu, which is a world away from rainy Wales, but the story itself is one of pure entrapment. You can totally see the main character's addiction as a clear metaphor for her own feelings of being trapped and unable to connect with the world. Jennifer's work was, if anything, even more surreal and macabre. The Pugilist gets into themes of transplanted identity and a loss of humanity. It's not a huge leap to see this as a reflection of her own enmeshed identity with June, where the boundaries of who they were as individuals were constantly blurred and fought over. But their literary world just wasn't enough. They desperately wanted to be seen, to be heard. And when their writing failed to break through that isolation, all that frustration just boiled over into this destructive collision with the outside world. So for 5 weeks, they went on a crime spree. But this wasn't really about malice or greed. It was a performance. It was a desperate, really misguided attempt to force the world to finally pay attention to them. They were clumsy, often getting caught because they were too distracted to even flee. It was, plain and simple, a cry for help. So what was the price for this teenage delinquency, for these acts of arson and burglary? The court's response was, well, it was staggering. They were sentenced to indefinite detention, and they would end up serving 11 years. And this is where the system just failed them completely. They weren't sent to some low-security facility. No, they were sent to Broadmoor, a high-security hospital for some of Britain's most violent male criminals. We're talking serial killers. 2 young women, whose biggest crimes were property damage and a desperate inability to communicate, were locked away in a modern-day asylum. What followed was, in June's own words, 11 years of hell. And it was inside these walls that their intense bond began to curdle into something far, far more dangerous, and it led to a fatal pact. At Broadmoor, they were heavily medicated, which almost totally destroyed their will to write. Their once safe relationship became a battlefield, and they came to a chilling conclusion. They believed that for one of them to truly live, the other one would have to die. And on the day of their transfer to a lower security clinic, a day that should have been a new beginning, Jennifer seemed to put their plan into action. She calmly told a journalist, "I'm going to die. We've decided." On the bus ride to freedom, she laid her head on her sister's shoulder and simply slipped away. So Jennifer's death left behind a huge medical mystery, and a sister who was, for the very first time in her life, truly alone, and paradoxically, truly free. The autopsy only deepened the mystery. Her heart was suddenly and fatally inflamed, but there was no physical reason for it. No drugs, no poison, no hidden illness. It was as if her mind, through the sheer power of the pact she made with her sister, had simply told her body to shut down. And what happened to June? Well, almost immediately, the silence was broken. It was like a switch flipped. She began to speak to everyone. After a year, she was released and has since lived a quiet, independent life. The pact, it seemed, had worked. Jennifer's sacrifice had purchased June's freedom. This is the poem June wrote for Jennifer's gravestone. It's a final, heartbreaking testament to a bond so powerful it could create entire worlds, and so destructive it demanded the ultimate price. It really leaves us to wonder about the profound and sometimes terrifying architecture of human connection.